I decided to completely overhaul my living room last weekend, and it turned into a massive project. Let me tell you. It all started on Friday evening when I was sitting on my couch, looking at the space and realizing how incredibly bored I was with the layout. The room looked exactly the same as it did when I moved in 2 years ago. I felt this sudden, uncontrollable urge to change everything right then and there. Instead of waiting for a sensible hour, I dragged my coffee table into the hallway, pushed the bookshelf against the opposite wall, and ended up creating a total mess before midnight. By Saturday morning, the initial excitement had worn off, and I woke up to pure chaos. There were books piled on the floor, stray cords tangled everywhere, and the room looked like a tornado had hit it. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, drinking my coffee, and wondered why I always do this to myself. Since I could not leave the room in that condition, I committed to finishing what I started. I made a quick list of things I needed, grabbed my keys, and headed out to the local thrift shop down the street. When I arrived at the shop around 10 o'clock, the place was already packed with people. I navigated through the crowded aisles, looking for a specific type of side table to fill an empty corner. After searching for about 30 minutes, I spotted a sturdy, dark wood table tucked away in the back. It was a little far, though. I needed to walk a little further to reach it. When the table right in front of my eyes, I can see it clearly that it had some scratches on the surface, but the structure was solid. Well, it's not a big deal for me. So I paid to the cashier, loaded the table into my trunk, and drove over to the hardware store to buy sandpaper, wood stain, and a couple of new pots for my plants. I got back to my apartment just after noon, ready to tackle the sanding process. I set up some old newspapers on the balcony, put on a dust mask, and started working on the table surface. Sanding down old varnish takes a lot more physical effort than people think, and within an hour, my arms were aching, and a layer of fine wood dust covered the balcony floor. Because I wanted the new stain to absorb evenly, I made sure to sand every single corner thoroughly. It was tedious work, I'll admit that. But watching the bare wood appear underneath the old dark paint was deeply satisfied me. By mid-afternoon, the sanding was finally complete. Finally. I wiped down the table with a damp cloth to remove the remaining dust and let it dry in the sun. While waiting for the wood to dry, I turned my attention back to the disaster inside my living room. I spent the next 2 hours sorting through the books on the floor, deciding which ones to keep and which ones to donate. I realized I owned 3 copies of the exact same novel, which shows how disorganized my shelves had become over the years. I organized the remaining books by genre, wiped down the shelves, and placed everything back in a neat line. And at around 4 o'clock, the table was dry enough for the first coat of wood stain. I opened the can, stirred the liquid carefully, and began applying it with an old brush. And look! The wood absorbed the stain quickly, turning a rich honey color that matched my floorboards perfectly. After finishing the first layer, I checked the instructions on the back of the can, which stated that the wood needed at least 4 hours to dry before receiving a second coat. This gave me the perfect excuse to take a break and get some food. I'm starving now, so I walked down to the diner on the corner to grab a late lunch. While waiting for my sandwich, I texted my brother to tell him about my spontaneous weekend project. He replied immediately, laughing at the fact that I had dismantled my entire apartment on a whim. He reminded me of the time I tried to repaint my bedroom in college and ended up getting blue paint all over the ceiling. I told told him my skills had improved significantly since then, though I secretly hoped I would not repeat that disaster. After that, I returned home around 6 in the evening. The apartment smelled strongly of wood stain, so I opened all the windows to let the fresh air circulate. I checked on the table and the surface felt completely dry to the touch. I grabbed a piece of fine grit sandpaper, lightly sanded the first coat to ensure a smooth finish, and applied the second layer of stain. The color deepened instantly, giving the cheap thrift store find an expensive appearance. As the sun began to set, I started the most frustrating part of the day, which was managing the tangled mess of electronic cables behind the television. Over the years, I had plugged in various devices, game consoles and chargers without any strategy. Consequently, the wires had formed a massive knot that took me nearly an hour to untangle. I used plastic zip ties to bundle the cords together, hiding them neatly behind the media console. It was a small detail, but removing that eyesore made the entire room look instantly cleaner. By 9 o'clock on Saturday night, I was exhausted. The table was drying on the balcony, the bookshelves were organized, and the cables were hidden. However, my couch was still in the middle of the room, and the floor needed a thorough vacuuming. I decided to call it a night, ordered some takeout, and watched a movie while sitting on a floor cushion. Looking around the semi-functional space, I could see the potential, which gave me the motivation to finish the job the following day. On Sunday morning, I woke up early, feeling determined to wrap everything up. The weather was clear out there. I'm not lying. I can even see the birds fly freely in the sky. When I stepped out onto the balcony, I found the side table completely dry and looking fantastic. I carried it inside, placed it in the empty corner next to the armchair, and set a small lamp on top. Wow! I can't believe my eyes! The transformation was remarkable. I mean, the warm wood tone brought a cozy feel to the entire corner, making it look like a deliberate design choice rather than a random piece of furniture. Next, I spent the late morning repotting my indoor plants. Several of them had outgrown their original containers, so I transferred them into the larger ceramic pots I bought the day before. I arranged the plants on top of the bookshelf and near the window, where they could get plenty of sunlight. Adding the greenery brought life back into the room, balancing out the dark wood tones of the furniture. By Sunday evening, the project was officially complete. I sat down on the newly positioned couch, made a cup of tea, and admired the view. The space felt entirely new, and the chaotic process felt completely worth the effort. I took a few photos to send to my brother, proving to him that I had successfully finished the project without ruining the apartment. He sent back a message expressing genuine surprise at how good it looked. I spent the rest of the evening relaxing in the quiet, clean space, glad that my sudden Friday night impulse had resulted in something positive.